want to tell a little incident that happened to you one afternoon, a bit like this afternoon when the sun was shining and
Yes.
you know, in Rwanda now. So let's just place you first of all. You were on the run. You were being your life was in danger, and there were marauding mobs who had machetes who were out for the kill. So you'd taken refuge in you tell us where you'd taken refuge.
It was the 18th of April. So I'd taken refuge in a house, in a friend's house. The house, obviously, on the day that the owner of the house said it's become very dangerous, there were men and women in the house. So he said, the women stay, but the men have to find safety somewhere else. So we had to leave the place. I won't go into the details of what I went through roadblocks and the near misses and the near deaths.
So you just had to leave this place of comparative safety into the open air.
Yeah. So okay. I had to leave in the afternoon. It was 4 to 5 o'clock, and find another shelter. I came to a place, a long stretch of road, and I could see a mob of people coming. And I knew, because I was passing over dead bodies, so I thought this is not going to be secure. So I decided to go and hide in a gully, waiting for the sun to set, and then carry on after.
In a gully, in a ditch, okay.
In a ditch. Yeah. And when I was hiding there, I could see in probably 100 and 150 meters that there were 2 boys hiding there. 20 minutes in the hiding.
Two boys? What sort of age?
Between 8, 9, 10. And they were hiding there. And it was a tacit understanding that you didn't communicate, because obviously communicating would compromise the hiding. So, and suddenly, and I think the boys had been there longer than I, and I'm sure they were very hungry. And one of them was trying to step out of the hiding place to go and get some food, and
some food. Where would you get food from?
Because it was spring, so the potatoes would be. So
okay, so go and get something from the ground, right?
Yeah, to get potatoes from a field,
yeah.
And they had to go and get those potatoes. And when one of them stepped out of the hiding, there was a mob of people coming, so around 50 people, and they saw the 2 boys, and they. Suddenly, they just went under the road where we were hiding. It took only 3-5 seconds, and in 3-5 seconds, it was just finished. It was a flash of machetes caught in the sun, 3 seconds, and they moved on.
Just let's take this in a moment. For anybody who doesn't know what a machete is, that's a sort of big knife.
Yeah.
And they all had these 50 people had these big knives.
Yeah, well, they carried, most of them carried those, the machetes, or sticks, or spears. It was mostly traditional weaponry. So they...
and they massacred these 2 young
they killed the 2 children.
Were you hiding in the bush watching?
When I was hiding, and I was watching, and I think that is the dilemma of remembering. It's one... You kind of think, could I have done something? Could I have intervened? Could I have helped? Could I have changed something? I suppose those are questions without answers, and those are questions where you stay with. But after that, then I went to see what had happened.
So after the mob had gone, yeah.
5 minutes after they'd left, I went to, because I was hoping that if one or they are still alive, that we could take them to a house nearby, or I don't know, to see if there was a possibility of rescuing them. So when I got there, one of them was already dead, and the other was near death. And
a little 8-year-old. And so you've written a poem which you've asked me to read.
Yes.
You've written it recently, haven't you, this poem?
Yes, I actually wrote it 2 weeks ago.
Okay. But it's about that particular incident.
It's about that particular moment. I think because it is it is a story which has stayed with me, and I think I've told you, and I've told many friends, that each moment, when I wake every morning or every day, I have never been able to forget this boy. So I thought, because I can't convey the reality of that moment in a story or be true to that moment, that maybe a poem would be more appropriate.
He was only a boy, 8 to 9 years or thereabout. He was lying in a pool of blood, his own blood. I came closer, and he tried to talk to me, but he couldn't. They'd severed the conduit. Air could not be sound, only shallow breath. Instead, I held his hand and looked into his eyes. I held his gaze despite the confusion and the accusation that met mine. I was determined that the last sight of his young life would not be one of despair, barbarity, and inhumanity. I tried to look human, a kind, adult face. What can one face do against 100 murderous eyes? A gentle squeeze against the sharp blade of a machete. Still, I held his gaze fast. He said, "Why?" I said, "Please don't." He said, "How could you?" I said, "Have mercy." The day turned into dusk. Our silent communion ceased. He stopped looking, tired of this land where souls turn into dust. I closed his eyes. I hope he understood us. I hope the rites were sufficient, the sacrament right. I made the vow to live and to remember. Later, the man from Osiek said, "Seek the path to the not coming to mind, the forward-looking horizon in the eschaton of love." All the weary combatants sighed in unison, "La luta continua." So, Richard, I need to ask you about that last line. Well, in fact, the last few lines, actually. The forward-looking horizon in the eschaton of love. That sounds a bit academic to me.
It's a line I borrowed from a man called Miroslav Volf, and he's from Bosnia. And he wrote a book called The End of Memory, Remembering in a Violent World. And I think what he's trying to say is any memory has to have an end, and the end has to be forgetting. So what I think I was trying to convey was that when I read the book, he was inviting me to try to forget, and realizing that it is quite difficult in a human context, that the possibility of forgetting is in this kind of eschatological end of time, where all things should
So you're not proposing that we just forget. It's a question of remembering enough to be at peace, perhaps, and then to be able to move on. Is that right?
I suppose it's a remembering which kind of redeems the past and makes us to be able to be at peace with that past, and to have a kind of secure present, I suppose, but living in peace in the absence of total reconciliation with what happened.
And then you finish by saying "La luta continua." What's that?
La luta continua is something I borrowed from I see Martin smiling. I borrowed from Mozambique. It was when the people from Mozambique were fighting Portugal to try to gain their independence. And it took many, many, many years, but finally Mozambique became free around 1980. Anyway, that was Frelimo motto, and I was thinking that although the journey into remembering and the journey into coming to terms with these things can be difficult, there is a hope, like the hope which motivated the fighters of the Frelimo, that the struggle goes on, but there is some kind of fulfillment towards